start recording the meeting and get started. So, howdy, folks. Today is Monday, May 13th, 2024. Can you believe it's 2024? It's like past like Back to the Future time, like so far. It's ridiculous. And this is the weekly security class-based meeting for OpenJS. Definitely check out the GitHub. You can just Google for OpenJS security class space and you'll find the GitHub pretty easily. Feel free to join. We're nice. So, no, there was nothing, nothing really useful in the pre-recording, just chatting with folks. So item one on the agenda is the fact that this meeting is the time for this meeting. Right now, this came to me, we talked about this before, but it came to me over the weekend when I was building the ticket for building the issue for this meeting. So I think one of the things that happened is that we're in daylight savings time here in the Pacific, I believe, and Ben, you'll have to back me up on this because I don't see all of the meeting details, but the Zoom meeting is tied to Pacific time, I believe, not to UTC, if I'm correct, because over the change from daylight savings time to not daylight savings time, it stayed 11 a.m. on my calendar in America. But I'm not sure what happened to folks in Europe. I think we had a week or two there where people arrived like an hour late because we were in that transition. And that brought to mind, that was just another point on the topic that happened last week, is that it's hard for folks like Joe to attend, and it's hard for folks in Europe to attend. So I created a discussion, and here, let me go find that discussion. I literally was just in it a second ago. Here, I'll drop it in the chat here. And just to kind of start out, the question is, should we change the meeting time? So I put 3 options on there to start. It's not the final discussion or poll to have this, but option 1 is, actually, let me just share my screen so we can talk about it together. Option 1 is keep it where it is. Ulysses? Can you hear me?
Okay. I think I can, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. What time is it for you right now?
For me right now is 11, sorry, 8. 8
So it's 8 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
for Ulysses, and we appreciate your sacrifice a lot in being able to visit and attend this meeting so reliably that late in the evening. So option 1 is we just keep asking the Europeans to continue making that sacrifice to attend the meeting. Option 2 is we change the meeting to another time, but we keep it American time zone focused. And then option 3 is, do we do something to make things more fair and reason and equal so that we can optimize for attendance from all of our European contributors and maintainers, so they're not taking a hit in their own personal lives. I know 8 o'clock for me, it would be story time with my kid. And so I never appreciate having to do that. So I'm just going to open, we have the formal poll in the discussion, but I want to just open the discussion up to see if there's any, see where people feel about that to start. Chris, go.
Yeah, so and we talked about this a little bit last week, I think. So some of this will be repeated for anybody that was here. But I definitely want to maximize inclusion and opportunity for everybody. It's not ideal that some people may be having to join at 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. or 3 in the morning or what have you. But the challenge is that if we move the time to accommodate for a few people, but we end up losing more than that, we've actually sort of harmed inclusion in a certain way, while having it improved it in another way. Kind of the net overall from a utilitarian perspective is worse. So we should take care to avoid that possibility. And then if you're going to do a different time zone or do any kind of alternate, when I say different time zone, I mean like where the primary, like where this is primary time for like North America, right? But if you're going to have a meeting at a primary time where it's EMEA or APAC, or alternating, if it's going to be, a time that's out of bounds of a typical NA working hours, and just having seen this movie play out before, you really need a critical mass of people that are committed to meeting at that time. You want to know that you're going to have, even if you're going to miss some of the people from one time zone, you know that you're going to have an effective meeting with the folks that are guaranteed to be there. That's the only way that I've seen that work out. And that's even more important if it's out of bounds of working hours for most of the folks. Sorry, waking hours. If like it's 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, you're very unlikely to get those folks in there.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's actually a really good perspective and insight. Ulysses, go.
Yeah, I can say that I know that the difference is big for the Europeans, but specifically in my case, it's not that bad because I have the express meeting in 3 hours. So for me, it's okay because I have to be kind of related. So I organize my week based on this. So yeah, that's okay. But I know that other people might not have this flexibility from Europe and so on. But specifically for my guys, I think it's okay. I'm also worried about the same thing as Chris. If we start to change a lot the time zone to the slot of the day or something like that, it might affect to the already regular members. So maybe we can do just a small change, like maybe 1 hour early or something in that direction to see how that impacts. And later on, we can go for more aggressive changes.
Thanks, Ulysses. Chris?
Yeah, I just remembered that this, I think, started the conversation that began this discussion was suggested by someone who had put out there that like specifically that if this meeting was same day but just 2 hours earlier, that would be perfect for them. Now that would be fine for me. But our colleagues on the western coast of the United States might not like that nearly as much. And I don't know that we want to necessarily talk about the exact specific times here and everything like that, but I just thought it was worth mentioning because that was sort of the catalyst for this discussion.
Well, in general, 9 a.m., like I'm on the West Coast, 9 a.m. for me is fine. It doesn't conflict with childcare duties at all. It's just, I have a standing meeting on Mondays that conflicts. So like, and other people may have similar things, right? I think the general challenge, I mean, I think the thing I remember initiating the discussion was that Joe had a conflict. A new conflict appeared for Joe, a standing conflict, and then he wanted to find another time, which is a reasonable question to ask. But I think that the reality is that a lot of us are involved in a lot of different meetings where we want to try to combine Europe and North America. And that basically eventually causes all of the morning hour slots to be eaten up for morning for the West Coast, because that's the only, like, those are the hottest contested ones. So like I'm definitely all for inclusion. I definitely think that we should be very careful about like not sacrificing inclusion for 80% of the meeting just to include that 20%, nor should we therefore decide it's okay that 20% is just forever screwed. So like, it's a hard one. But yeah, like it's always fine to explore new times, right? It's just, I think we should be very careful when somebody who used to be able to make it will no longer be able to make it with the change. And I think that needs to be weighed against who would then be able to make it. And I think we need to focus on presence as the higher order bit over convenience.
That's great perspective, Jordan. I appreciate it. So I wonder, rather than maybe a situation where we alternate times, where 1 week it's North American time and next week it's European time, I wonder if instead, I guess the thing to optimize for is to help um, more boots on the ground contributors and maintainers be able to participate in these discussions. And so maybe an alternative is that I'm not sure. I'm not sure if weekly is the right cadence or not, but maybe every other week we also have a collab space meeting that happens in European time, and that is something that like I and key folks can guarantee, and it being every 2 weeks isn't so bad. And then we can be purposeful about what we schedule in those times and optimize for that being a conversation that um, other maintainers and the European maintainers can more easily engage with. Ulysses, where you're living this life, is that you can tell me if it's a bad idea.
Yeah, I think it can be a tricky one.
Okay, cool. Well, in that case,
I
let's
tend to
take a
agree on
look.
that. Like, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do in this meeting is have decisions and you know, push things forward. I think that gets hard if you have an alternating meeting time with different folks attending both of those, because you have to really, it makes decision making kind of hard and consensus kind of hard if you have to have the same conversation or folks miss that conversation. So as much as possible, I would encourage us to try and just do it at a time that is least bad for everybody.
Yeah, totally agree with Ben's comments. And I just wanted to add, when I mentioned earlier that where I've seen this succeed, where you had a cohort of individuals from a particular time zone committed and regularly meeting, that was where that was effective. I think it's also important to note, per Ben's comments there, that in these examples, that cohort of individuals was also had some autonomy around like a shared project. So it wasn't just that they were, you know, these meetings were sort of equivalent. It was that time when we had the APAC meeting, we would specifically discuss kind of the things that they specifically were working on. And that very well might not be something that applies to this group, where you just sort of have, it's basically the same meeting at the same potential agenda items, just in very alternating times and with very alternating individuals due to the time zone difference. And then you end up with the problems that Ben just highlighted. So that's a really good point.
This is actually a great discussion. Thanks, folks. This is a good perspective. So I think really the next step here is definitely please update the poll. I'd love to see folks' perspective just so we can like capture that and go through it. Ulysses, if you wouldn't mind socializing this amongst your peers as well for their perspectives. I'm not married to anything, just want to make sure we're doing right by folks. And it seems like I'll also make sure that Joe pays attention and goes and looks at the meeting recording for this meeting as well, so he can know the best way to engage, so we can get him back, because I'd love to have him back. Chris?
Yeah, sorry, I keep raising my hand.
Oh, you're good.
I have a suggestion for option 2. Option 2, I think, should be to explore changing the meeting time, because I find myself between option 1 and 2, where I'd like to keep the meeting time, but if, you know, we send out a doodle or whatever, and like there's some other time that works better for like the vast majority of people, let's change it to that time. But right now, the way that option 2 is written is such that like, oh yeah, let's definitely change it. So I think, and I think what you meant by option 2 was probably more in line with what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's actually really good feedback, Chris. I will do a quick edit right now. Explore changing. Okay. All right, updated. If yes, I understand. Update the poll. Okay. Oh, Matt, go.
No, I just want to strongly +1 what Chris just said. I'm fine where it is. I'm not sure what Joe Seppi's conflict is. It sounds like, Jordan acknowledged that was kind of like the Sentinel event that kicked off this entire thread. So I think that Jordan posted something in chat that's very important. It's like, who are the decision makers? So obviously, Adam, with your position, if you couldn't make it, then we probably wouldn't have a meeting time offered that you weren't there, right? So I mean, and in terms of my case, I attend because Joe invited me, and I'm interested in and I'm invested in this group. But if it came down to Joe and I would rather have Joe go. So and as Jordan also acknowledged, as you go earlier in the day for me, I cannot tell you how many work groups I don't attend because I have conflicts. I decide on an hourly basis which one's the most important, if any. And you'll be running, this happens to be open for me. Hopefully you'll find a great time on a doodle poll or something, or a poll that everything magically works. That's the hope. That's the best case. But if not, just know that, I would gladly bow out or diminish my vote's importance to making sure Joe can attend.
Thank you, Matt. That's actually, I appreciate that. And then I appreciate you being here because, you bring in like a broader perspective from other angles. And so I think of you as a really valuable contributor to this. And I hate to see you go from this. Ulysses, go.
Yeah, I will say also that maybe as a thing that we can do independently of the calendar changes, is maybe we can do a more active effort with the recordings and so on. So maybe we can do like kind of a streaming or stuff like that. So people that are in different time zone or just having a conflict or whatever, they can just watch the video. I personally watch a lot of working group videos like in 2x, 3x, so just jump into the pieces that are relevant to whatever decision I want to participate on. And that helps a lot. Also having the notes, because Ben's taking a lot of the notes, but generally this is helping a lot because sometimes you just follow one topic or whatever you want to participate on something. That way is super easy for the people to follow up, especially if you're in different time zone.
Appreciate it. That's great. So I'll take the action item to follow up with Ben or just go myself and figure out how we can get this back to being YouTube streamed. I know when I first joined that was happening, and we can definitely go and do that again.
I mean, we do record these, and I have started updating our YouTube channel regularly. Usually I do it on Friday just because I have a bunch that I need to do and it's good to batch it, but I could easily switch to doing this one the same day for ease of use. Yeah, and like we could stream this. That's also an option. I've had some issues in the past, but I'm sure I could sort those out. So both of those are trivial to do.
Cool beans. All right, thanks, folks. I think next item, we only have a couple minutes before we have an update from around the security, JavaScript security training. That starts at 11:30. One thing I wanted to chat with folks about really quick, if you will oblige me, is dashboards for open source projects. So, for example, there's a few things out there. There's CLO Monitor. It has some neat stuff. Very documentation heavy, but I'll admit the UI is hot. I'm just a fan, but it is documentation heavy. It also relies on the best practice from a security standpoint. It relies on the best practices badge and scorecard, which are not always the most ideal source for a security dashboard specifically. There's this, and I'll also poke at Jenkins again for security. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's a lot. It's fascinating, and there's a lot of data here.
My main issue with LFX security is that it's an arbitrary list of included projects instead of including everything or self-serve.
So that's the list that we discussed many months ago, and that's why I referenced last week as well as being no one in LF. I did not know it existed until it was brought up on this call. And then when I looked at it, I laughed out loud because Tecton was actually on the front page. And I know that Tecton maintainers don't give a care about, what that they've got 10,000, you know, vulnerabilities. They don't care. So
Yeah, if we take a look at Jenkins, which is relevant because it's one of the main pieces of software on the planet used for you know CI/CD stuff, and you see what's shared on the screen right now. Holy guacamole! It's I don't know how accurate this information is. I've been going through it a little bit to try to see the details. A lot of this stuff is buried deep in files that are very hard to take a look at. But the fact is, it's popping. Jordan, go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at CLO Monitor as well. And I think that if anything is going to be a useful dashboard for open source projects, it needs to be either something that open source project maintainers can do in a self-service manner to check on any or all of their own projects, or it needs to be something that anyone on the internet can do to check on any open source project, meaning their entire dependency graph. Uh, and it's also fine if those things are added on a self-service way that are slow, but like you don't have to proactively add the internet. But it seems like all of these things either have narrow scopes or manually maintained lists of packages, and so that's sort of you can use it as a means that you can use it as an example or like a let's see how this might work, but it's just like not particularly valuable unless it's in one of those two buckets I mentioned. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate because like CLO Monitor seems interesting, as does like LFX's, but like I have 500 projects. If I can't quickly access my 500 projects on the dashboard, what good is it for me?
That's really good perspective, Jordan. Matt?
yeah, actually, it's kind of interesting because and also thinking in the context of what Jordan just said. So last Friday, I finally put out a release of a project I work on in OWASP Foundation. And I know that there was a conversation the week previous with another maintainer who activated CodeQL for all the repos and didn't tell that he just did it for the org and didn't tell each of the project owners. But he made sure they were all passing. And he made sure they all knew how to turn it off if they wanted to. But it goes back to the opt-in thing. I think it goes back to let's not create a dashboard as the first artifact or something on the near roadmap. Let's talk about it. Let's get some tools in place. Let's make it self-serving, opt-in, and then tell me what I added. I looked to say, how do I add a badge? And I added badges for CodeCov and CodeQL, and I made sure they're at the top of my README because as an owner, then I can be proud that I spent time activating these things. I was passing and did these things. So I controlled my own dashboard, if you will, my own and what I wanted to be judged by based on what I activated, and I'm spending time as a maintainer in my project for, right?
So there's really two things here. One, there are and we haven't even actually looked at LFX Insights. That's another one if you have not seen. That's fascinating to check out. Have some interesting choices in there that they've done. I'll just use Express is actually in here, fun fact. Best practices score isn't set up. I have some personal feelings about mandating Garrett and Confluence.
There's no mandate for that. Just to be clear, those are just appearing in there. It's because a lot of we add integrations for these manually, so I don't know why those are actually appearing. But yeah, there is no mandate for projects to use.
I just assumed. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to,
yeah, just time check. Are we past your allotted?
The person has not arrived yet. We're waiting for that person. They couldn't attend before 30, so basically just keep going until they arrive, and then we'll just stop this part and we can revisit. There's really
that goes back to what I was saying is that projects who are in here don't know it exists and they don't care because they activate stuff in their CI and what they do for their processes, right?
Yep. I think one of the things that would be interesting, what I've observed is there's two kind of angles to this dashboarding concept in question. to be thinking about. And I agree, we need to focus on tools, but we also need to think about the longer term. And the question that comes to mind for me is that as a separation of concerns a little bit. I think there's some fascinating contributor engagement data in LFX Insights, and I can totally see the value in this. But at the same time, it's not security stuff. And I think the mixing of the two creates challenges where maybe having a separation of concerns, and we separate out security vulnerability dashboards, like Jordan was mentioning, so that it's something that they can manage across their repos, and maybe think about separately from other open source metrics dashboards. Yes, everyone hates stars and other non-security metrics. I completely agree. So this is I appreciate this first chop from folks. If there are other things you've seen beyond the ones I've mentioned here that you think are worth just being aware of, definitely let me know. I'm all about Pokemon and collecting all the different ways that this is done to understand what the best way for us is. And with that, for us is here. And so I will, I think Ben would be the right person to do intros if he wants to provide perspective. And
just a little bit of context for folks. So as part of the Sovereign Tech Fund funding, we are tasked with creating free JS security training, which is great. We're very lucky that we have the opportunity to do that. And so when we were looking around for folks to help us with that, because we don't have that expertise internally, Frost's name came up at the top of the list repeatedly by everyone. And so we're really lucky that it worked out. Frost, I'll let you introduce yourself and give your background. But one of the reasons Frost is here today is one of the first checkpoints that we have is we wanted to review essentially the outline of the training with this group, and just to get feedback and see what some of the very smart folks on this call think about it. So with that, Frost, I'll let you introduce yourself and a little bit about your background, and we can just jump in.
Cool. Yeah, I know a lot of the folks here already, but it's great to see some familiar faces. So I'm Faraz, and yeah, I was excited when Ben reached out about the this project to do a JavaScript security course. My background, for those who don't know, is I spent a lot of time in the NPM community working on various modules. I have a bunch of different things, a lot of low-level stuff, some stuff in Browserify, some stuff with peer-to-peer networking, a code style and linting project, a whole bunch of different things. Yeah, so I've been in the community for a little while, and then yeah, more recently working at Socket, which is a tool for developers and security teams to understand the risk in their supply chains. So we do that through kind of analyzing the contents of packages with a pretty data-intensive operation that we do with basically ingesting all the code, running static analysis over the contents, doing some analysis of the metadata and the maintainer behavior and things like that. And we're putting most of those findings out for free for the community on our website, so you can look up any package and see what we've found security-wise about that project. There's scores. There's some overlap with the security scorecard project that the OpenSSF has and other various efforts in OpenSSF, but there's also a bunch of stuff that goes beyond that as well. And then I guess the only other relevant part I forgot to mention is I also taught web security at Stanford for a couple of years, created a course there called CS 253 Web Security. And that's actually, a lot of that is kind of, was the basis for this JavaScript security class course that I'm making for OpenJS and LF. So you'll notice if you look at the two, the outline of this course and then kind of what the syllabus was for that Stanford course, that there's a lot of overlap. And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going to draw a lot of the things that worked in that class into this. And obviously things are going to change and be different because it's a different medium, different format. But I'm hoping to kind of bring as much of that as possible over into the course. Yeah, so that's it. That's kind of the background. did I miss anything, Ben? Otherwise I can kind of jump into the outline and share it with folks.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, so let me just share my screen here. Just kind of share a little bit more about like how I'm thinking about it, but I definitely am open to feedback. I want feedback from people. I definitely think the course is a little bit too long right now. There's definitely things that could be cut. And let me also drop the link to this document in the chat so that we can all see it. Let me see here. Okay, there we go. So if you want to follow along directly in the Google Doc, you can. But yeah, so the idea is, yeah, this is a course for sort of a general web developer audience. It's not like a first, it's not like a first security course, or it can be, but what I mean is it's not like a actually, how do I frame this? It assumes familiarity with the web platform, but not necessarily like all the security parts of it. And there is a little bit of a review of basics of the web platform in the beginning, just to sort of level set, but it isn't, it's not going to teach you web programming or JavaScript. That I guess should be expected from a course called JavaScript Security. So it will assume knowledge of that, and then introduce pretty much everything they need to know. And I have it broken out into different sections down here. But actually, before I get into that, let me just cover kind of the different pieces here. So web security fundamentals, they should leave the course with kind of, an overview of all the various web technologies, that like all the common stuff. They should know what XSS is. They should know what course headers are, same origin policy, all the obvious fundamentals that no course would be complete without. They should understand like kind of browser security model, how JavaScript sandboxing works, common vulns, not everything. There's like an infinite number we could go over here, but kind of common vulns like XSS, SQL injection, that type of stuff. Some privacy topics, so understanding, cookies and tracking and that type of stuff. Then defense, so not just to understand the attacks, but kind of like how to use various HTTP headers. There's a whole bunch of new stuff in this area that is really be great to share with folks. That it can really help eliminate entire classes of attacks. Like for example, CSRF is not a thing anymore if you use the right headers. So just kind of going over that history and then kind of the defenses. And then server side, so there's like a whole section on Node and what differences there are there, the things that only apply to the server side. And then I like to have a bit of coverage of like new threats that are interesting. So things, when I taught the class before, it was things like side channels. Spectre was really interesting at the time. And then, probably it'll be different this time around. Like I think I will cover probably a little bit more supply chain side and just kind of talking about dependency trees and like trust and open source a little bit as well, because that's become very topical recently, as we all know. And then we can kind of jump into the outline now. But before I do that, any questions about like kind of the high level sections there? Do they make sense to people? Also, if we want to share feedback after too, I understand it's the first time everyone's seeing this, so totally fine to like comment in this document after the meeting, and I'll see all that feedback as well. Cool. Well, yeah. So I mean, I can go over kind of some of these sections here, but
actually, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I just couldn't find the button. I had a question.
Oh,
is
sure.
Since you've been teaching this class in a university environment, I wonder what sense you have on where the biggest gaps you see when folks start the course. Are there some key places that are like the biggest ones that you think are to focus on first?
In the university environment, the biggest gap is actually just the knowledge of the web, honestly, like, because you get a lot of folks that have taken C++, Java, you know, whatever the Python, whatever the intro class is using. And at Stanford, I think it's Java in CS 106A. And I think there is a Python option now. So some students come in only knowing Python or Java. And there's actually very little web web programming education at least at Stanford. I don't know how it is at other universities, but yeah, there's like one web class. It's only, I don't know. I don't want to, this is being recorded, right? It's okay. I'll just say it's okay. I took it when I was a student. I didn't learn terribly much, but so I think that's kind of the gap. I don't know. I think we can assume probably a little bit more knowledge from the folks that would be like on an OpenJS like course website, but I also kind of do want to cover like just like a review, because I explain actually when I cover these kind of basic concepts, I do kind of refer back to them later on in the later sections. And so there's certain parts of like JavaScript that I want to cover in the beginning so that they know, so that we're all on the same page when we get later in the class. But that's kind of yeah, that's kind of what I've seen is just people, actually a lot of people told me, you know, at the end of this course that they felt like it was a great way to learn the web through a security lens. Like if you came in knowing nothing about the web, like by the end of this, you really do know like more than most people about like just various aspects of the web browser and of JavaScript. And, you know, I mean, parts of the language that like someone taking a React class, you know, like, or like a boot camp would never touch, right? I mean, like window.opener, post message. I mean, there's all these things, you know, it's sort of a class in the web platform in a way. So a lot of folks liked that. And I like that too, because I kind of, I like that aspect of the class too. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that actually was a fantastic answer. Thanks for the insight.
So am I correct in that, you know, I guess, do we want to, what are your all's feelings on like that assumption that we should assume like probably more web/JavaScript knowledge from the people taking this course than we would from like the students that took my class?
I might have an opinion just from being in product security so long and seeing a lot of web startups is there's quite a bit of syntactical knowledge on the language itself. Like, okay, they're using JavaScript, they're using PHP, they're using web-based languages, but they still don't understand what's going on under the hood with the web browser and the ramifications of it. So I think that same, even in a place like Facebook and Google, I would say like the level of browser knowledge and under the hood magic is not always there, even if they're fantastic software engineers and can produce a ton of product with high quality code quickly.
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this is just going to be, you kind of have to start and see what the interest is and the people who are like kind of finding the community. I do like how like I see this and it's pretty, it covers a lot. Like when you said about the web platform, like, you know, you're covering HTTP protocol and how the browser interacts with it. And I like that it's covering so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think you're gonna have to find like who's gonna take the course, and then what do they know about it, and, you know, kind of what community kind of builds up around it. What do you think about that? Like, are you expecting to just kind of jump in and have a kind of a target audience, or like, you know, who your target audience is going to be, or is it just going to be, you know, people who are with OpenJS?
So I think that the idea is it's going to be a free class open to anyone, but probably, you know, the target as I'm building it out is developers, you know, people who are writing code. It's not, you know, targeted to like a security person really. I mean, they could obviously get value out of it, but there's there's like something like 100 times as many developers as security people, or maybe it's 10 times. I can't remember, but it's at least an order of magnitude or two more developers in the world. So I think we want to target them more than just security people. So so I think that, you know, so I ideally, like, someone comes in, they know nothing about web security other than like that security is important, or some, you know, vague thing like that, and then they can kind of leave armed with like a bunch of concrete knowledge about, you know, the types of attacks, the types of defenses, you know, bunch of real world experience. But I, you know, looking at this now, like I do know that there already are sections here that I know I'm planning to cut, so I probably should just cut them from this outline right now, just in the interest of, you know, because this was a you know, a 10-week class. We met twice a week, 80 minutes each lecture, plus like take home homework assignments. So that's, you know, 80 minutes times 20 is, I can't do math. What is that? That's like
1,600 minutes, but I don't know how many hours that is off the top of my head.
26 hours of lecture content. So assuming that they can read as fast as I can talk, which is, I usually talk fast. That's probably, it's true. I don't know. That's a lot. That's probably long. Yeah, I don't know. The intro to kind of Node.js class right here was significantly shorter. It's about 7 to 8 hours of material. I was hoping to do more material because I'd prefer not to, you know, I prefer it to be kind of like the ultimate resource for this. But it probably does need to, yeah, 26. I mean, I think, yeah, I guess I'm thinking kind of like 2x the length of this one, maybe something like that. So I'm thinking, like, you know, cutting things, like I already decided I'm going to cut the Flash and Java applets section. Like, that's probably an easy one to cut. Although I do like the history of that, but you know, but like, for this, you know, if we're trying to cut stuff, that would be an easy one to cut. Things like that. If anyone has suggestions on things to cut too, or things that you think are not as relevant, that would also help me if you know, leave an inline comment in here on any of those things, or anything I missed.
One question I have is that the description of the title, I guess in the description, JavaScript security, offering in-depth understanding principles, etc., for JavaScript security. But then the outline and everything seems to be focused almost exclusively on web security. So is what's incongruent here? Is it the description needs to be updated, or does the outline need to include non-web JavaScript security practices?
So there are server-side sections, but you're right, it is like 2/3 at least web. There are, like, you know, discussions of SQL injections, NoSQL injections, shell injections. Path traversal is, I believe, is also, it's not on here, but I should add that, because that's unfortunately still one of the top attack vectors. Denial of service, user uploaded content. Although again, this is kind of in the context of web, that's fair. And then for the defensive techniques, you know, there's node specific security stuff, but then there's also like, this is also not, I mean, authentication. Yeah, I guess technically it's web, but it's also, it's more of a cryptography lesson, honestly. And then TLS is also, yes, web, but again, more of a yeah, I guess this is actually, yeah, this is very, very web. You know, it's fair. It's fair. Maybe we should rename it. I mean, we could call it JavaScript and web security. I mean, I guess turning the question back to you, like, what server-side security focus do you think is missing? I already mentioned supply chain attacks. But,
yeah, so I mean, like, some things in here you have are good, but like, so for like command injection, which I assume is what you mean by shell injection, right? These are the same, but it's under the heading of server-side web attacks. So there's other surface area where that could be happening, but it's not coming from a web vector. another thing that I would like to see here, and again, I don't know if the mandate is expansive enough to cover everything that we want to cover, right? But shared memory concerns would be good to have in here, or in a JavaScript security guide sort of thing.
Yeah. Oops, I just minimized it.
I
No, that's good.
would,
That's good. I think I cover in the course. There is a section on like using the buffer API in Node correctly, and specifically avoiding like the unallocated memory issues where you can return buffer dot. Well, talking about the API design actually is part of I cover that in writing safe code. So it's sort of like a lesson in API design and not giving people foot guns. So as they go out to write their own code, that they don't create an API where if you give it, a number, you get unsafe behavior, but if you give it every other type, it behaves fine. That type of thing.
Matt?
Yeah, I guess I'm fitted to follow Chris in my comments this week, but it's along the same line. Because like you set up at the beginning, because I was confused because the beginning you set up, who is this course for? It says web developers. So I thought, then why are you defending the web stuff? Because you set it up, that's the role. So the question is, what's the task? If this is something that we're indebted to do for the grant that's in, we have, what's the requirement? And of course, I just wanted to say that, of course, mentally, I associate JavaScript with web developers. So if we're doing the 80-20 rule, that's great. We're getting bang for the buck. That's perfectly fine. But what crossed my mind early is, what other, we could like look for every single possible niche and every possible attack vector. But what's the requirement? Are we doing good enough for this? Because I mean, to me, I come from serverless JavaScript. So what's the concerns there? My concerns are people are using. I've been looking at JavaScript tools to do some security stuff for OAuth Foundation because it's only written in JavaScript. I'm like, so what are my concerns? They're definitely just JavaScript utilities. What are my concerns there? How do I install my environments? A lot of these questions get what fulfills the needs, and is it okay just to say this is web centric? I think that's fine, because
No, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, if you think about JavaScript users, I mean, it's the vast majority are using it with the web in some way, right? So I mean, I think it doesn't really need a defense, honestly. If I think it's within scope for this to be 80%, or it's okay for this to be 80% web, 20% server side, and other various, miscellaneous JavaScript issues. I mean, some of this stuff is going to apply in both front end, in both the front end and in the back end.
I'll say one thing in closing until Chris beats me to it again. So I'll just say that my hope is that a lot of this stuff that is presented as a, not just here's the attack vector, but for JavaScript, here's the best practices for JavaScript, that there's always here's the problem and here's how the JavaScript angle on how to approach this or fix this. So
yeah, absolutely. The goal is always that they leave with they leave as a better programmer, and they know what to watch out for, and then specifically what to do, right? Concretely what to do differently.
You have in this meeting some of the folks from TC39 TG3, which is the security task group for TC39, which is the standards body for JavaScript. Part of the program of work of the security task group is to maintain best practices or recommendations for writing secure programs. So this is well within the mandate of that task group. So not that you don't have already enough to do, but we would be happy to have you we meet weekly on Wednesdays. So if you have the time, it would be great to have you there to talk a little bit more about this. And I don't know how collaborative, if at all, this was going to be, but you may have some volunteers to help work on it or review or help us sort of liaise and feedback into the work that we're trying to do over there. No pressure.
I appreciate that.
I see that Adam goes down with the hand.
Oh, one of the things that comes to mind for me are the sorts of paved roads that software companies put in front of their engineers to kind of get ahead of like the stuff that comes up a lot and gets them in trouble a lot. And I think a lot of what you have is there already. One of the things that I would say the number one thing that I haven't seen a lot of understanding of is DOM manipulation and the impacts and security ramification of that. Just as a matter of course of writing code, it's the first paved road like most of the companies I've seen put in front of web engineers is to say like, okay, we need to stop this DOM manipulation. You guys are just being cowboys, and they don't necessarily appreciate what it means to be doing that, and the reason why that is dangerous. Going back to they understand how to syntactically create like a React component like that, but do they understand why writing inner HTML can be dangerous and the model and the browser defense model around that?
Mhm.
I can
Yeah.
think of others as well, but that was the first one that came to mind for me.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Yeah, I agree. I think I'm trying to remember, did we cover we certainly cover XSS and then I think in that example I talk about, you know, the danger of, you know, one of the things I'm really happy with how the course turned out is that one of the big themes we cover is like, you know, just as we talk about these different types of, you know, injection, SQL injection, NoSQL injection, shell, path, they're all and of course DOM, you know, DOM injections. It's all like, it's always combining you know, something that's trusted that comes from the app itself or from the developer themselves with something that comes from the user, and then putting that into one string, right? That then, you know, gets intermixed and then interpreted as all coming from the application, even though some of it came from the user. And I think I cover in here, you can see trusted types, which at the time, I actually don't know what the state of that standard is because I haven't been following it, but I will make sure to see what the latest is there. But I covered at the time just sort of the proposal there and talked about why that was beneficial. Yeah, and so we go over injection multiple times in multiple ways, and that we keep coming back to that theme. So by the end, I think people really got the message.
We're nearly at time. Ulysses, go.
Okay, I will go fast then. Yeah, basically, I think the target is fine in terms of, you know, having like already JavaScript developers or people who already are familiar with the code. So that way is okay. In the past, when I try to teach something related to security, it's very hard to engage with them sometimes because they know they're supposed to do secure things, but they don't know how, and learning is hard and complex. So I think showcasing some edge cases, you know, like remote execution, stuff like that, that they can open the eyes from the moment zero can be a good option for motivate them. I like a lot that the syllabus is kind of okay in terms of it's not just following with the classics, you know, like what's top 10, things like that. So that way was super good. I, by the way, also watched your videos on YouTube on your class in Stanford. So it was a really good, but very long. So I would say like maybe we can divide a little bit the course in smaller courses if needed. So that way it can be easier. And I think for non-web environment also maybe worth mentioning like stuff like Electron or, you know, CLI apps, stuff like that have some special cases. But I think overall the people will understand, you know, they think of every time that they get an input, I should sanitize it no matter where's the environment. So the people will get a general idea overall with this syllabus for sure. But maybe just going for some specific libraries and stuff like that for edge cases like that can be interesting. I think maybe something missing can be JSON web tokens. I see that it's become a super popular way to do things, but people doesn't follow or in details maybe. So that can be a good option. Maybe is there an I
What was that one? Sorry, I missed it. What was
JSON
that?
web tokens. JSON web tokens.
Oh, yeah.
Can be can be a good option there. I think maybe also talking about the threat model of Node.js can be interesting. So they can stand to understand also like how to treat dependencies and libraries and stuff like that and how that works. Maybe how to report a vulnerability or how to read a CVE properly, so you can understand like, yeah, I got positive in this, but this is truly positive in my case, how to evaluate these kind of things. I think that's useful for a lot of developers that are fully focused on building, shipping, getting alerts and ignore them. So that can be a good option. Maybe having a section for tooling can be a good way also to say like, okay, you have the theoretical concept, but there are a lot of tools, like Socket.dev and many other tools that can help you with dealing with all of these. Scanners, these kind of things that can help a lot of people in the day-to-day, especially for teams, because potentially a lot of junior developers will not follow this course as the first thing. So probably, not all the team will be aware of. And yeah, something that maybe we can remove or rethink a little bit is maybe the plugin section, which is more related to Flash and Java applets. Maybe we can just turn it around Chrome or browser plugins in general, like what's the risks associated and the permissions and so on, which is fascinating, by the way. So the people can understand a little bit of how risky it is to force your user to use plugins and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, I think it's a really promising course.
Awesome, thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah, I wanted to just add for the Node.js threat model, there's a section. I actually spent a whole kind of class on it in the lecture version, where we covered things like DNS rebinding, which I think are super fascinating, and so few people understand DNS rebinding attacks. And they are by default. I mean, if you, I think there's some proposal now in web standards to fix that by default, but I'm not sure how widely deployed it is. I'll need to check, but yeah, for by default, when you make a CLI app and you create a local server and you're just listening, on a local host, I don't think people recognize how risky that it actually is when it binds to all interfaces. So yeah, I definitely try to raise awareness of that type of stuff. But I know we're over time, so thank you guys for the feedback. Again, if you have time after this, the most useful thing I think would be, again, anything I might have missed, if you want to comment on the doc, or anything you think could be cut, since I know I'm going to have to cut some things here. So if you have any strong opinions about what would be the low-hanging fruit to cut, that would be amazing feedback to hear from you guys.
Ross, when would you like feedback by?
In the next week or so. It's not like super urgent. Next week or two would be fine. Yeah, it's early enough on that it's okay if it comes in a week or two.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'll definitely put some comments in there. And I'm excited to see how the course works out. Yeah, I think this is a great outline. I don't envy you trying to cut stuff out of it, though.
What was that about cutting out? Sorry.
I don't envy you trying to cut stuff out because it's all important and it's all valuable.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. Totally agree.
All right.
Cool. Thank you,
Peace
guys.
out, everybody. Nice to meet you for us.
Yeah. Bye-bye.